RPSM Talks.
RPSM Talks?
RPSM Talks?
RPSM Talks.
RPSM Talks.
RPSM Talks.
RPSM Talks.
RPSM Talks.
RPSM Talks.
Welcome. It's great to be here after a little bit of a break over the summer. Hope everyone's been keeping well. This is RPSM Talks, brought to you by Regent Park School of Music. RPSM is a community music school providing music lessons to both Regent Park and Jane and Finch communities for over 20 years by removing financial obstacles. To learn more about the school, please visit www.rpmusic.org. My name is Thompson, and I've had a long history with the school, both as a student, teacher, board member, and all types of, every role that you could have at the school, I've probably filled it at some point in time. And I'm happy to be here once again for another edition of RPSM Talks. So today we'll be talking about licensing and sync. And, we hope to answer some questions about how to get your music into TV shows, film, commercials, video games, and whose job it is to do that. And, we'll learn about just how it's impacted different artists and their music and put them either on the scale or sort of on the scene, or give them a resurgence into their career and into the music. Before we meet our guest, Jasper is going to run a short little YouTube clip to help set up and explain what licensing and sync is. So today we have two guests with us. We've got Ben Chan from Monarch, formerly of V1, who is a music director of publishing and administration. We also have Mike Jansen, who is the founder of independent sync licensing group, The Greater Goods and Co. And so I'm excited about this chat just because I think there's so many different ways, so many different places to go with this and different avenues. But I think what I'm going to just start off with is getting both of you guys to just introduce yourselves and kind of introduce kind of the sphere in which you, the domain in which you operate in for the students, so we can get started there. And Ben, I'll start with you.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, Thompson. It's nice to meet everyone. I work at a company named Monarch Music. We were just renamed that over the past week, so I'm personally getting used to that name as well. But I have been in the music industry for roughly 14 years now. I work at a record label publishing and management company. My job within the company is to do synchronization and licensing for all the different platforms mentioned in that video. So if you are interested in our music, I would go to the table with you and negotiate. And if we can work something out, my job is to lock that in place, get an invoice and contract sorted out, and move forward on that. So that's really a lot of what I do on the record label side. I will also work on the publishing side with a lot of administration, probably a topic for a different chat. But to get on the publishing side, it mirrors what we do on the record label side too. Same thing for any sync requests. We try to negotiate a price and get that locked in place so that the song can be used for either a film or TV show. The management side, I don't work too heavily in that, but I do work closely with a lot of artist managers where we try to help pitch their music to film and TV if we're not associated with them on the record label or publishing side. So yeah, that's in a nutshell, that's pretty much what I do.
Awesome. And Mike, I'll throw it to you.
Cool. First of all, I want to say it's really an honor to be here with you guys. Thompson, it's really great to meet you. I'm a fan of yours outside of this and hope to sidebar with you at some point. And Ben Chan is a legend who I've had the pleasure of knowing for over a decade. And I'm also going to just mention that I've known Jasper for over 20 years and know him as an international global award-winning DJ. Let's not forget to acknowledge he's a very humble guy, so I like to blow up his spot just a touch. So I started Greater Goods, my own business in Toronto. I'm in Los Angeles right now, but I'm from Toronto. And that's where I started the business just over 10 years ago. So that's when I connected with Ben. I came to the business from artist management. Ultimately, it was decided for me that I should no longer manage, I think. But I think for me, I realized that I did not want to manage artists, but I did want to manage their songs. And that's kind of the lane of sync opened up for me. I like it because it's particularly democratic. You know, they're complete unknown artists who are making a fantastic living for themselves. Some of them never having to leave their home. You know, if they have a studio there, they can win from that space, and that's really kind of what I enjoy about it. So for me, it's been my own business, and everything is at will. So we've built a roster working with independent artists and labels, and you know, doing a very similar service to Ben. You know, just making sure that those artists have a voice in the rooms that we're being invited into. You know, we're getting briefs and things every day, and people asking us, do you have a song that does this? And largely our job is to make sure that we're pitching them the appropriate music, making sure that it gets cleared in an appropriate way, and everyone gets paid. And that's kind of my business in a nutshell. But yeah, truly an honor to be here. I love what you guys are doing with this program, and yeah, thank you.
Awesome. You know what, Mike, I'm actually going to start with you based on one of the things you mentioned, which is kind of unknown artists hanging out in their bedrooms, you know, creating music and, you know, making that living. So, you know, one of the things I think is, you know, that we're trying to illuminate in these talks is that there's so many different ways to exist in the music industry. There's so many different roles, and, you know, you don't always have to be the front man, but there's also ways to create and still be, you know, a viable person in this space. And so what does that look like for someone who, you know, we may never have heard of, but is, you know, kind of crushing it? I don't want to say in their bedroom. I'm sure it's more sophisticated than that, but, you know, who's kind of just writing music, putting it out, and has a very specific purpose for what they're doing as far as sync goes.
It's a good question. Look, I think primarily an artist's job is to express themselves, right? To express their unique POV, right? That's why we're drawn to art in general, right? When it comes to sync, I think the job shifts a little bit. There's a humility involved in being of service to picture. And I think the approach, if you're going to be consistent at it, and it's an area of your business, and like you said, there are multiple facets of an artist's career where they can have different streams of income. So we'll just talk about sync as you know, as a mindset, if that's a place that you want to have consistent sort of growth in. And I think it's a different approach. So it's not waking up saying, how do I express myself? I think that's what you do naturally if you're an artist. In this, I think you look at, hey, what is the lane that I want to be a part of? Let's say it's movie trailers. Hey, you know, that's an area where custom music is dominant. You know, that's a lane where you very rarely hear an independent song just on its own. There's usually a remixed element, there's sound design elements, there's all these different things. So that's a real ecosystem where you have a lot of creators. So if that's an area that you wanted to get in, you would really just learn, you know, watch a lot, pay attention to how sound works to picture. You know, I think when we're dealing with a set amount of time, which is what we're dealing with in sync, you know, if you have a 1-minute trailer or you have a 30-second ad, if you have a very repetitive song, a song that doesn't have a lot of dynamic changes and things, you're probably not going to have great chances of landing something where there's a lot riding on a short piece of music, you know? So I think the number one step is really understanding what the demand is. And that's a big part of my job, as I know it is for Ben. You know, people are coming to us saying, do you have a song that says this, does this, is this tempo? You know, maybe they've already got a song temped into what they're working on, and they just couldn't clear it for whatever reason. They're coming to you for an alt. I think that the first step is really that humility in understanding that in sync, our job is to serve picture. That's, you know, the clearest way that I think that you can put it is when you put up a song to picture, does it help tell that story? Does it heighten the emotion around it? Does it give it forward motion? And so, if you're already making music and sync is something that you're interested in, I think one of the first steps is really just trying to put it up to picture. Pull up an ad on YouTube or a scene in a TV show or something, and try to mute something and just see how it works. And if it doesn't work right away, trying to edit it a little bit, understanding, oh, hey, the scene changes here, so my song should probably change too. I think it's just kind of putting on a different hat. What we're doing is creative problem solving. So there's a problem to be solved there with the scene and a music need to help enhance that. Are you up for the task? Because being an artist and releasing your own music is its own unique puzzle piece. You've created something that's unique to you. If Ben or I are going to take that on and have to be representatives going to pitch it, that the truth is that puzzle may not exist yet. You may give us a piece and it's like, well, they may not have the movie yet that you've made, that this song would fit for. So in the meantime, it's just about surveying what's out there and seeing how you can be of service.
Cool, thanks. That brings a good point. So Ben, I'll throw to you, which is you've listened to all this music, and somebody comes with a request. Where do you start?
Well, with you mean like a search and a brief that they're looking for, say, a film or a TV show, and yeah. So listening to the music that I have, I make sure that I'm fully aware of what we have on the record label side and the publishing side. Separated all by genre, all ready to go in my mind, ready to pitch. So going through these briefs or these searches that come from these different companies, what goes through my head is, okay, well, let's make sure I pitch as appropriately as I can to these searches, meaning if we're talking about a spot or a commercial that's looking for the biggest song of the summer, something that's happy and upbeat, obviously I'm going to go to music that has that kind of sound, that tempo, even lyrics that are more positive. And they'll usually be pretty specific about those asks. And I think like Mike mentioned, they normally have a reference track in mind when they send these searches out. So they'll say, hey, we love this song, we've tempted in, but we want to look at other options. It could be for multiple reasons that they didn't go for that original song. It could have been the cost itself, because it's a big artist, a big global artist that's just asking for too much money. Or they're just looking for something fresh and new, and they want you to send along something that's similar in sound. So a lot of that goes into my mind thinking, okay, what can I send that sounds either similar to the reference, or if they don't have a reference song and they give me all these criteria, whether it's a call to action in the lyrics, something that they're looking for in the melody, then that's really, I try to follow that as best I can. And then when I send along music, you don't want to inundate that music supervisor or ad agency that's looking for that song by sending them like 10 to 20 songs. Usually I like to try to keep it to say this. I mean, this is all subjective. You can keep it to 3 to 5 songs of what you have, what you think is most appropriate to pitch for that search, whether it's a commercial or a spot in a TV show that they're looking to fill in, or film as well. So that's the process that kind of goes in my mind very quickly when I see a search.
Cool. There's a question. I remember when I was younger, I used to play. Well, I don't really play. I actually suck at video games, so it's kind of hard to say I played anything. But so there's Tony Hawk, and I remember at a point in time where all these artists in some of these video games that were sort of, I guess, if you want to say underground in their sphere, but started to become bigger. And so the artists who weren't really, known artists, all of a sudden now became these artists. And I'm wondering if you guys have an example of someone who's kind of, you've worked with, maybe under the radar, the music got into, whether it's a game or a show or, one of these sync situations, and then that kind of helped kickstart the career. Because we all know the artists who we already know and recognize their music. It's like, oh, that's cool. Like we recognize it in, the stuff. But what are maybe some examples? And maybe it's not someone you've necessarily worked with, but where you've seen that kind of be actually the beginning of starting something for an artist.
Sorry, do you want me to speak on that?
You know what? Either or. I'm
Either
normally I'm much better at just
Sure.
at throwing that, but you can start and then we'll go to Mike.
Sure. Well, I guess as far as like specific to video games, right away I was trying to go through what helped out. I can't think of through video games a large amount of artists on our roster. There are a good handful that we get a lot of good video game placements, and I think if we think about Electronic Arts or EA and their supervisors and what they do, people love, especially when it comes to like FIFA and all the different iterations that come out, or the year-by-year games, or the NFL Madden games, things like that. I feel like that does help the artists sort of break their music out to the world, because people love those soundtracks and they follow them, whether it's on Spotify or try to find anything through iTunes, whatever DSP they use. I find that being a part of those can help. We did have a placement on the FIFA 22 game that it was recent, or not recently released. It's coming out soon. So it's for our artist Keys and Crates, and we have a song that dropped on there, and we feel like that helps. And it definitely does it break them more than where they are now? We're hoping it will, but they're also, we also, maybe I'm biased in saying this, we also feel like they're well known too. So,
but it might put them in a different market than
yes,
before, right?
for sure.
What's this for the students? What's the DSP?
A digital service provider. So anything from Apple Music to Spotify, when a record label or the independent artist sets up their music through a distribution through one of those guys, even Tidal, to have their music available globally to be heard. And with Spotify, the biggest thing there, I guess, maybe I'm a bit old and I don't use enough of these different, I use mostly between Spotify and iTunes, but with Spotify, the save lists and putting things in people and users in personal or individual user playlists. I think off of a video game placement, when they hear a song off that, they kind of add it to their own playlist, and it gains more traction that way. With the New Music Fridays as well, all the different playlists that are available, stuff that can be used in a video game sync becomes more known from that, and gets added to different playlists across the board, whether it's like a jazz playlist or an indie rock playlist after that. So it can certainly help that way.
Cool. I think Jasper actually has that ad ready to go. Jasper, did you want to cue that? I believe, is that the one you have?
Yeah.
Keys and Crates. Sweet.
Yeah, there it is.
Ah, Mbappe.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Awesome. Ben, just before we jump over to Mike, I have a quick question about so what is the process? So, I'm a kid at RPSM. I'm, doing the Keys and Crates thing, because that's totally something I think in the wheelhouse where they could kind of get started with all the stuff Jasper's teaching them. And so from you getting the request, matching it with Keys and Crates, like you said, was that a process of sending a few, 3 to 5 tracks to them? Like, why did that request actually come to you?
So that is a combination of many things. I always like to say, because we, at the company, it isn't just me, I should say that. There's a team of us. I'm here in Toronto. We have people out in Nashville. We have people in New York, Los Angeles, over in the UK, and different territories. So we have a team of people in the sync department that help pitch. And EA is I believe it's originally a Canadian company, or at least Canadian started. And the offices in the California area, we have people there who will go in and sit down with the music supervisors there, and there are listening sessions that are done. So we do hype them up on the music, and we send them. And it's kind of one of those things where, you know, they'll say to us, and Mike knows this, they'll be like, hey, we have 3 or 4 different projects on the go. These are the specific genres that we want. What do you have? Hit us with the newest stuff that we love, or that you think we're going to love. And that's how we get the music into their hands. And so whether it's us or the publisher, you know, we send along the music that's new as unreleased as possible as we can, so that they can feel pretty special about, you know, licensing it first. And that's the process of how we got it to them. So we have our creative sync people, and we have somebody in New York as well who does that too, that works with our LA person to get this music along to them. I helped a lot with the licensing portion. That's where I stand, to be honest. So I got the invoice and the contract in place on that, or the quoting, and that's also very important at the very start, where I think this took at least a few months, you know, where the approval is well beforehand, and you kind of sit there when you get so if you're an independent artist and you're making music where you know, at the end of the day, you're the record label, you're the publisher, you probably would need some help. And that's where I would say Mike Jansen is the best person to help you, because he runs his own company on that side. I mean, you can talk to Monarch Music and say, hey, Ben, would you be interested? But then I have the process of talking with other artists in repertoire or A&R people at my company, right? To be like, hey, would you be interested in more? Because I can't just take on music and start pitching it out and say, hey, I'd love for you to have a listen to this music, because we need to make sure that we have interest in that sound recording and the composition. I'm not saying that Mike would just take that on. He has his vetting process too. So you have to have a listen to the music and make sure to see if it fits him and his company, and to be able to pitch that. But it's good to find a representative, is what I'm getting at, to send that music. Unless you have the bandwidth or the time to do that, right? Like you're making the music yourself and you feel comfortable through the mixing all the way to mastering and saying, okay, this is done, and now I want to send this along to EA or a video game company. So you're kind of acting as your own business manager to try to find who the gatekeeper is for the video game, and then sending them that music, or having that conversation first to find out what projects are going on with them. So it's good to get a person in first. I think I'm answering your question here, where you're asking, like, how do you get your song to the right people, right? Like for those video game opportunities. And it's usually a good idea to try to find a representative, a sync agent at the start. Or if you sign a record label and a publishing, sign to a record label and a publishing company, then it's our job to get that music into the music supervisor's hands for their projects.
Perfect. And that's great, because you know, I guess my question to you, Mike, is like, how do I get you on my team? How do I get you in my corner? But also along with that question, which is, you know, there's Keys and Crates are obviously, like, they've got their own persona, they've got their, you know, their audience, they're doing their thing. What is, I mean, there's some things are obvious, some things are less obvious. What is appealing about making sure that the music gets into sync, gets it placed in, you know, these different places? But first, how do I get you on my team?
Good question. So I always refer to this sliding scale when I'm listening for things, you know, and I kind of joke with people often that I have 2 sets of ears. Like, I have my own set of ears and music that I listen to and stuff that plays in my house, and then I have my work ears. And you know, sometimes my personal ears factor in, and sometimes, you know, less so the other way around. I'm not really playing a lot of work stuff at home, you know what I mean? I like to have some, though I'm in a home office now, so there's very little separation. But what I will say, when I'm listening to something for work consideration, number one, I'm listening for, what does the song do dynamically? Is there an emotion that it taps into right away that is relevant consistently for sync? You know, I'm always going to look at the widest lane of opportunity possible, right? So when we're using that Keys and Crates track as an example, and I've known those guys for years, and it's a dynamic song. It's a percussive song. There's a number of changes and shifts in it. It's not a linear track. And that's why, especially when you're looking at a promo where they're going to have different cards and things flashing and clearly different shifts. I refer to a lot of that stuff as like editor candy. It's stuff like an editor's job is they're going to cut to something. And if you can give them little dynamic shifts and things, that's really helpful when you're trying to, land an ad or a promo or something like that, again, where you have a short amount of time. So those are things that I'll listen out for and listen, say, hey, does this song have energy or is it slow? Is it, happy? Is it dark? Does it have lyrics that are relevant? I joke with artists sometimes who will say, oh man, like I have a song from 8 years ago that keeps getting syncs and I have no idea why. And I'm like, man, let me dispel that myth for you right now. Like, you make songs about depression, generally speaking, and that's your one song that's about freedom. Like, look, it's I promise it's not as big of a mystery as people will make it out to be. This is not a Willy Wonka factory back here. I think when you're looking at themes that come up a lot, there's themes that we could talk about. Non-romantic love. Ben and I know this theme so well. It comes up every single day. If people stopped making love songs today, we never had another love song in our life, we'd be good. We have a stockpile of songs about love, be they good or bad experiences about love. We have enough of those songs. What we don't have enough of are songs about being friends with people. So when I'm looking at sync, like, there's songs where people are coming to us saying, if it's a Visa or a car company or whatever it is, they're not actually selling you a card. They're not selling you a car. What they're selling you are ideas, that they want to sell you on the idea of freedom, of the open road, of adventure, these kinds of things. And if your song speaks to that, you're just going to have a higher chance of landing those kinds of opportunities, or if you're looking at more so like, hey, you know what, maybe ads is not my lane. I'm more of a TV and film person. It's like, okay, cool. Like, again, there are themes that come up really consistently that could be more open-ended, So when I'm listening to songs, I'm like, is this a really specific song lyrically? Because that may limit what I can do with it. If someone is really, really literal, or there's, say, a lot of cursing in a song, or there's not a lot of dynamic shifts in it, those are all the little boxes that I'm looking for, because ultimately Ben and I are in the supply and demand business. People are coming to us with a demand constantly. And the truth is, a lot of the songs that we represent don't actually meet that demand. It's our job to discern, like, when someone comes to us with a specific ask, a large portion of our catalog won't be right for that specific pitch. It's our job to be listening out for these elements. So, like I said, it can often be this square peg round hole sort of thing, where you have a great song and a great opportunity, but they just don't quite align. So creatively, that's, some idea, and it could be a whole conversation unto itself, just a long list of things that someone might look for when they're thinking a song would be sync friendly. The other side, which Ben alluded to a little bit, is the business end of it. Hey, is this a completely independent artist? Do they understand their rights? Do they work with, other writers who also understand their rights? And if they don't, are they interested in understanding their rights? Knowledge is power. And I think if people are coming into the conversation asking the right questions, then they can have a really great future here. I think ultimately any writer who's on a song will need to approve, that sync. That's something that I think people don't necessarily take into consideration. So the people that you're making music with, we're going to need to know who those people are. And if you say, oh, it's all good, it's my song, but these are my friends. I mean, if you've ever watched a, documentary about a band that broke up or something, you know that things can go awry. So I think by and large, most people want to do sync. They want that income, they want that exposure. So it's just about getting ahead of that conversation a little bit. And if you write a song with a few people saying, hey guys, like, I'm going to go approach an agent or something, and I want them to take on my music, or I'm going to go approach a music supervisor. Let's talk about, like, hey, are you guys cool with that too? If so, can I go present and say, I'm able to give approval on your behalf, or would you like that email to come directly to you? Because the truth is, everyone's going to have to approve it. And if there's 3 writers and one doesn't approve it, we can't move forward. So I think, if you're an independent artist and all of your music is completely independent, there are terminologies that you can use that will get your emails taken a little more seriously. If you say, hey, look, I'm fully independent. I own my own masters. I have 2 co-writers. They will approve, things along with me. Here's their emails. Everything is one stop. One stop is a really magical term. It's something that we look for a lot, because again, if you put yourself in my shoes or Ben's shoes, you want to make our jobs easier, right? We're potential gatekeepers to opportunity. And if you can take a moment to say, hey, what's Ben's job like? What are the problems that he deals with every day? Could I not be one of those? Could I be someone that Ben looks at this person and goes, I like this guy. I want to go get some more opportunities for this person, because where they weren't knowledgeable, they asked the right questions, and they were able to get ahead of what this process is. I think a large part of this job is empathy. For us, it's empathizing with music supervisors and the choices they need to make, what serves picture, and we're going to empathize with artists naturally. That's why we do this job, is we're trying to get the wins for the artists, and it's I always refer to it as Robin Hood, especially because we're an independent. It's just like, look, we're going to take the money, they're going to spend it on somebody. I just would like to have some control over who that goes to, and we can dance around the pot of gold and decide what great things need to be done with those funds, but it's a balance. I'm always looking for things creatively and really trying to understand, does this song meet the demand that I get realistically every day? And then the other side is the business end. Am I able to represent 100% of this? Am I only representing a master side, or their publishers involved? And then also I think that the third part is Ben and I, there's actually quite a bit of overlap sonically in our rosters. We're dancing at some of the same parties, so but with that said, there's also plenty of other companies that represent completely different types of artists, ones that we may never work with. Someone may specialize in neoclassical, someone may specialize in country, and maybe if those are the genres that you're making, maybe you'd be super served by those people. So, I also think when I'm listening to something, someone may say, hey, Mike, like, here's a great bluegrass record. And I might listen to it and cry real tears, but I just don't know realistically if I'm the person who gets the demand for that all the time. So then I need to have that conversation with myself and say, hey, look, am I doing this person a disservice if it's on my roster versus another company who may be in the mix on projects like that a lot more?
Well, that brings up a, question, which is, I guess, to the both of you, is really how this space has evolved. Some of the students might not know, we can throw to it a little bit, but, if we think about the way ads and music have been thought of, which I feel like, I want to say there's been a polarization, but if we think of stuff around like the Beatles, Michael Jackson, Rolling Stones, like if we think about placements and ads versus kind of the thinking about it now, is there still a artistry versus this is selling, like, don't use my music for that, or are artists more open to anywhere my music can be played, anywhere I can raise my platform, I'd like to do that?
Yeah, the idea of I guess maybe you're asking, like, does it feel like you're selling out if you're going down this road? And I think today, and even I can even say, because when I was 2021, it's at least 10 years now where everybody's been quite open, I'd say, to the idea of using their music for, especially in commercials. I mean, I saw in that intro video where there was that Feist track for Apple, and I think I feel like that's sort of the bigger one as a Canadian artist goes, that kind of said to everyone, like, hey, you can be cool and do this too, and you're not fully selling yourself out, and you can still keep your brand, your artist brand and your image, and get into this world. So in that way, I feel like it's a great way. And we have artist calls where we'll do listening sessions, or they have they tell us, okay, this is what we like, this is what we don't like. So it is for you as the artist or the producer, composer, whatever you're doing in the music space, come with your own ideas or your own requirements and your own standards of what you want to be involved in. We get a lot of, if you're doing commercials, we don't want it. I don't see a lot of these anyway, but, nicotine commercials, nobody really does those anymore, but, or a political commercial, nobody wants to be involved with those. So maybe a blacklist, I guess, or a list of things that are no to you, to say like, okay, I don't ever want to be involved in any of these types of pictures. Violence as well. Like, I don't want my song to be used in a violent movie, something very graphic. Anything of a nature that doesn't fit to your lyrics and your music, ask yourself that first before you engage with me or Mike about like, here's the music and go work with it. Because if we're working your song to something and all of a sudden it's a creative decision later, and we always have this, at Monarch, we say, if you don't want to do this, we won't do this, right? Like, because they could just be incoming requests. They could be songs where we've generally serviced their music through a large email blast for like a couple thousand people. And it's like, well, we put it out there in the world, we'll see, whatever bites we get. And sometimes it'll be in a space where somebody doesn't want to be involved or their music involved in that platform. So that's no problem. It's like, okay, cool. But it'd be great to know about that first from the creative, to say like, okay, we now know maybe we're going to be a bit more bespoke or more specialized in our servicing and when we bring up your music. Mike brought up a lot of different things that I wanted to sort of add on to. I'm trying to think like, well, one thing I wanted to say for like creating music for synchronization, especially for commercials, I think an easy space to start is cover music. Who's an artist that calls to you, and is it the style of music that you want to create? Or if you're doing your research enough to say like, hey, I think, whether it's the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, whoever it may be, it's like, I want to create that song and I want to use, be able to pitch that music out to them, knowing that the master recording is yours, but the publishing is going to be the original artist or the writers involved in that. So that's a whole different licensing discussion about, it's not one stop and now it's become different parties that have to approve. But I think for practical creative purposes, if for an easy way for somebody to start as a songwriter, find a song that you really like. I'm just thinking of artists the easiest example of somebody who became big through YouTube videos, I guess Justin Bieber, that's how he kind of started, right? He was just doing cover songs. Even one of our own artists on the publishing side, her name's Destiny Rogers. She started out, she signed with RCA, and she kind of started out doing covers as well through YouTube videos. And a lot of people, it's a lot easier to jump in it creatively that way. And if you want to focus in on sync, try to find songs that you think might be a bit more happy and upbeat, sort of that sunshine feel for those commercials. And I think generally you could say a lot of commercials or spots do look for that. Although you can go the opposite and do a cover that's a huge contrast, right, to what that original song is, something that's really happy. All of a sudden you've made it a very deep emotional track that may come up later for a commercial search. You never know. But I think that's sort of a good place to start that I wanted to mention as far as like, where do I start on the creative level to kind of send my music around, whether it's to Mike and myself or directly to a music supervisor. Of course, knowing your rights after that, to say I can actually represent this on the master for sure, because, I've made this myself. And the cover, you can find that out through your own research online. So you can use SOCAN, is a performing rights organization here in Canada. So if you create a lot of your own music, this is what I like to say to all our publishing clients if they're very new to the game. Go to socan.com or .ca. So I can't remember if it's ca.com, but go to that site, get yourself a membership. It's free. Sign yourself up, and at that point, you're essentially setting yourself up a bank account for the future. For money to come in, whether it's through sales of your music or through synchronization for a TV show where you'll get paid royalties in the future. But to jump back to the whole of like idea of getting involved or whether you want to or not, have your own standards and make sure that you really go through the process of understanding where your music could end up, and if you're okay with that. If it's a moral thing or an ethical thing, ask that of yourself too when you're creating that music.
Awesome. This talk has gone by incredibly fast, and I can't believe it. And one of the things we also like to do is we want to turn it around onto you guys, because along with kind of understanding about sync, but part of it also is like understanding about your journey, because there are so many roles in the music industry, so many things you can be doing. We also like to kind of just illuminate how kind of what your process was to get there. What's cool about, I feel like, the music industry is that I don't think there's anybody who's come on the chat about what they're doing in the industry who it's been this very linear path of like, oh, that makes sense that was the next step. It'd be great just to kind of hear what, where your beginnings were, what you were, I guess, nerding out on, and what landed you in the spot that you're in right now. Mike, I'll start with you.
Well, I mentioned that I've known Jasper for a long time, so I'll work him back into this. I know Jasper because we were both heavily involved in the independent hip hop community in Toronto. And so when I was a teenager, I used to rap. I was in a group that put a record out. Jasper was DJing, and so that was very much a community thing that it was a beautiful time to be into music and trying to understand it. And to be honest, the business really didn't factor into it at all for me. And I never really thought that I would work in the music industry. I eventually had friends who worked at labels and stuff like that. And I, that wasn't really my calling. Sync came to me specifically because I started to manage a band. It wasn't hip hop at all. It was totally a different thing. I was curious to learn different genres and things. And Sync was one avenue of being an artist manager that I really enjoyed and felt like, hey, I'm okay selling something as long as I believe in it. And with Sync, I saw that there was an avenue where the type of background that I had and that sort of ear, I didn't see a ton of in Sync. So I saw an opportunity. I felt like in Toronto, I was often around a lot of people who were very similar to me, taste-wise and scene-wise and stuff like that. And I wanted to take on a different challenge. And I really knew nothing about it at all. I was managing a band and very, very naive. And I just started cold contacting people. I figured out that I could represent this one band, one stop. I knew it was fully independent, and they had one EP. And I just started to, I can't imagine building this business without the internet. It's unreal what you can do just by searching some things. I mean, the fact that everyone has access to, the same information if they have an internet connection, which you can get for free at McDonald's. I mean, it's a pretty amazing thing, So with a little determination and just kind of looking at it, I was like, hey, look, I think I have something to offer here. And it took me some time to build it, a lot of consistency. But one band kind of snowballed into 2 and 3. And once I got a video game placement or two, it was kind of like other bands were like, hey, yeah, we would also like access to those kinds of opportunities. And, that was 10 years ago. So to me, it's a lane that really ultimately boils down to being a trusted source. And as we all know, trust is not a thing that's easily established in life, So I think if you can kind of stay the course and understand, again, empathize with what people's needs are and what their problems are and try to help solve those, then you're in business, But yeah, this job definitely did not, it kind of just came to be, it really was a lane that, like, by a process of elimination almost, I did so many different jobs, tried so many different things. And I will say that learning through your mistakes, like, you never really are learning when you're winning. When things are working out, that's usually not a great learning time. But when you're messing up, you're learning, and there's a lot of value in that. So, if you can continually kind of put yourself out there, and if Sync is something that you're interested in, with a little bit of research, you can find other people who are also interested in that and continue to learn. And that's exactly what I did. So every time I would reach out to someone, if they had an extra minute for me, I would ask them a few questions or see if they'd be willing to introduce me to someone else, because I came in very, very cold. I knew zero people. So yeah, that's kind of, fast forward 10 years now, and we're a staff of 5, and and working on stuff that I'm genuinely still really excited about, and able to have talks like this. So yeah, and if anyone has specific questions or anything like that, I'm happy to answer them outside of this.
Cool. Well, we'll definitely get to the Q&A session. I'll give Ben a quick opportunity to let us know about your journey, and then we'll start opening up the floor to some of the students.
Yeah, I mean, I did see myself working in the music industry. If I went back, say, 20 years, I'm in my early 40s now, and I guess from childhood till now, I've always enjoyed music. I had Royal Conservatory training, if anything, to start. And, actually, I like how Mike said
that resonates with us.
Yeah, well, I would never play in front of you, Thompson, because I would just get laughed at. But I got to about the 8th grade, and then I was like, okay, that's it. Like, my sister is probably the better of the of us. She made it to like I think 10th is where you can actually teach, something like that. Anyway, Mike said something about like sort of like when you're winning, and that actually resonated with me. Like, you're not really like it's in your losses or really in the challenges that you face to really to understand what you have to do to be successful in the future. It kind of reminded me of piano teachers that I had growing up. They'd say to me, "Why do you keep practicing the parts that you know really well? Practice the parts that you don't know." I was like, "No, but I know this part really well, and it's fun to play it." And so I always hated doing it because it would be slow and painful, but you do have to always go through that process. I just wanted to put that out there quickly, because it really is true for almost anything you do in life, whether it's personal or your professional career. You have to kind of go through that crap and understand and make those mistakes. And then, really understand by looking back and saying, okay, I've learned from that and I know what to do moving forward. Or you may take a few times to learn, you're going to stumble a bit. And so going through that, growing up and being around music, what got me into it. So jumping to that, I was around a lot of friends who were in bands. I like to say I was a grunge alternative teenager growing up, maybe kind of like, the 90s from Pumpkins, Nirvana, wherever. So that was kind of my music phase. And I had a lot of friends who enjoyed playing in bands. And one friend in particular, who I'm still friends with today, and he is in the industry now still. And I always kept in touch with him. I went to high school with him. And, I was always the groupie. That's how I was kind of around the music. So I'd lift all the stuff, in and out, when they were done, I'd be like, "Hey, do you need me to take this to the band?" Whether we're at the Horseshoe, Opera House, wherever, I was like, I'm there, whether it's 1 or 2 in the morning. That's how I was able to be around music. And sort of that love of just being around that kind of translated into at least wanting to be involved years later. I didn't jump into it. I ended up graduating with a degree in business. I taught English overseas in Japan for a few years, and then I came back and I thought, okay, well, maybe I do want to get into music. So the friends that I stayed in touch with who were in music and still are today, I talked to them, and it's kind of trying to find, for me, it was finding the right internship. And I think for any students out there, I think that's the best way to do it, to kind of find a company that's willing to take you on and give you whatever, and be open to any role. And I started off as an intern helping out with merchandise, right? Like just the stock room, things like that, or delivering CDs, to begin with. I started with, a bit of digital marketing and coordination on that front. And the only reason I got into sync and licensing is because the person who was in that role at our company left the company and it opened up, and I just happened to be there. Honestly, that's how I got into it. And so that was back in, 2007, 2008. And from that point on, I stuck with, my boss then, who's my boss now, through different iterations, meaning like the new name change and also different acquisitions. And so I have a lot of loyalty and trust and I put a lot of hard work at, not just for him, but for the work that I want to do, of course. And so I kind of stuck with him. And this company, Last Gang Records, is where we started, and that company still exists today. And now we're part of Monarch. And so along the way, it was sync licensing from, I guess, intern digital coordinator to sync licensing and publishing administration along the way. And that's and from that point on, it was really just kind of working with any and every music that came our way. And we have a lot of genres that we do deal with, but to kind of like with music supervisors, one point I do want to bring up is yes, creatively you want to try anything and everything you can, but I think it's smart to stick with something that you know, or that you want to build in, because people will know to go to you, right, later on to say, oh, this person has this kind of music, and I know it fits well with my kind of projects. So if you're sort of that point person over and again to create that kind of music, I think that's a great idea. And whether you're servicing that music directly or working with Mike or myself to help that music get to the right hands, I think that's a very important thing. And then in the future, you have different lanes. You're making your artist brand and your band or whatever you're doing, maybe this over here, and then you say to yourself, I want to be a composer now for film specifically, and I want to get hired to do that only. What kind of films do you want? Do you want to do horror films? Do you want to do comedies? What kind of music, like films, do you want to get into? Or do you want to just work at a production house making library music and making little cues here and there, or specifically music, being a producer for spots, and that's your only, or creating jingles, things like that. So there are a lot of different lanes. Or you can just be a songwriter. Mike mentioned that you could have 2 or 3 different songwriters where that's what your job is. It's really to create, to get song cuts for an artist. Maybe you want to go down that road, and sync licensing just happens to be a part of that down the road. So there are a lot of different opportunities as a creative if you want to work in this industry. Starting off in front of the camera, or later on behind the camera, and you want to continue on, whether it's just on the business side or a combination of the business side and the creative, where you're in the studio making that music specifically for something in sync. I think that's something worth thinking about as you venture on and journey on into this music business of ours. So yeah, that's my bit there.
Awesome. And for those of you who tuned into, I believe it was our second RPSM talk, you will see the gentleman that Ben was speaking of. Before we get into questions, we have a little segment called Taking the Learning Forward. So if there's anything, any books, podcasts, resources that you want to direct the students towards in terms of just, hey, they want to follow up about this conversation, whether it's to be in your shoes or whether it's to how do I connect with someone like you and what are some of the steps? If you've got any advice, we'd love to gather that.
There's one book that was really helpful for me. You guys know Donald Passman, that author, like his how the music business works. I think that's what it's called, but I picked that book up in like 2005 or 2006. I don't know how many editions they have, but I feel like that book is, even if you get like an older version, it's still relevant and very straightforward. It tells you, here's the artist and here's the team around and how it builds out. It's from the perspective really of the artist, I think, to say, okay, who do I need in my life at this time based on my career trajectory? I think it's a great way to get yourself educated and knowledgeable. Yeah, there's a link there for a site. That's perfect. I would purchase his book at your local chapters or order it through Amazon.
Awesome. And Mike?
The Donald Passman book is amazing. A lot of information, man. That thing is thick. It's like a Bible. More recently, there's a music supervisor named Amanda Krieg Thomas who put out a book that is, meant to be sort of how to understand how to get to music supervisors and stuff like that. Very brass tacks, very direct, just kind of about pitching to music supervisors, understanding what that process is like. The Donald Passman book's incredible about understanding the full picture. And that's a book that is actually like the Bible. Like, I think a lot of us keep it around and refer back like, oh, what does it say in this chapter about this thing? Because publishing can be a very convoluted area of our business. So, that's a great book to always kind of have as a refresher on the whole picture. But yeah, Amanda's book, I think, yeah, look, it's called Thinking Sync Primer. It's like, yeah, she just tells from a very kind of like, hey, look, this is what I need. This is what I'm looking for. This is how you should approach someone like me. These are the ducks that you should have in a row, that kind of thing. So yeah, if you're looking for something that's very brass tacks, I think that book could be helpful.
Awesome. I think Jasper just put it up in the chat, so people can go look for it. At this time, we want to open up the floor to questions. I see we have some members from the RPSM Youth Committee joining us for joining us this evening. For those who are unfamiliar with the Youth Committee, it is a committee-wide youth group for young leaders of high school age. They meet virtually every week at this time. Well, not at this time because they meet on Thursdays and from 7 to 8. But they engage in social activities, discussions, educational workshops like this one, and leadership and development. Are there any questions from Youth Committee members or any of the audience members? Feel free to raise your hand, unmute yourself, or even put the question in the chat if you'd like. And don't everybody do it at once too, so. Actually, I have a question that I didn't get to, which is, what are some of your most memorable sync moments? I was chatting with Jasper about this earlier, and funny enough, one of my earliest ones was the Raisin Bran Heard It Through the Grapevine. That was actually the first time I heard that song, so I didn't even know it was like Heard It Through the Grapevine. I just know it as the Raisin Bran song for like the longest time.
Mike, you want to go first here?
One that we've been involved in, or one that like
either personal favorite or one. Well, actually, give us one of both. So maybe one that you whether it's childhood or just something you've really liked, and one that you've been involved with.
Okay. So interestingly, I did this little series in quarantine called Just a Moment. If you look up our Instagram page, it's on there, and it's a little interview series that I did. Like a lot of people in TV and film didn't have work, and so I kind of just wanted to reach out to people and sort of ask them like, what was an early moment? Basically, your question, like, what was an early moment that inspired you in music supervision? And so I asked that of a bunch of different people, like clients of mine, artists, music supervisors, whatever. And I did one myself. And I was like, look, like, I don't want to overthink this. So I just kind of threw one out. But the one that I chose was a scene from Boys in the Hood. If you've ever seen that movie, it's a young Lawrence Fishburne playing a father figure role. And his name is Furious Styles, which alone is incredible. But he takes his kid to go fishing for the day kind of thing. And it's this like quintessential kind of father-son moment, whatever. And they're driving back in the car, and the 5 stair steps Ooh Child plays. Things are going to get easier. It's like an old soul song, and it was just really, really sweet how it kind of played on the visual of them driving back from going fishing and having this like really sweet moment. As they pull back into their neighborhood, the son's like friends across the street are getting arrested, and it's just this juxtaposition of this like really sweet classic soul song and saying things are going to get easier or whatever, when kind of clearly like things are getting maybe a bit better for this kid because he had this great moment, but across the street it wasn't so good. And I just thought it was a really great use, and probably my first time hearing that song, because yeah, that movie came out like the early 90s. And then recently I sent this one to Jasper, but we did a sync with a rapper in Toronto named Deja SB. And we kind of put a track together. I brought a beat from a producer and gave the track to Deja, and we wrote something for another brief. Something playing there. Wrote it for another brief and pitched it for something, and it ended up in this Crown Royal ad. And the Crown Royal ad, they were like, hey, we really like this song, and like, tell us more about this artist. We're thinking about casting them in this ad. And they did, but it ended up being a 3D scan. So Deja had to go to this place in Toronto and go get like all of these different cameras around. They're texting me from the place, like, look at this. And it's like, hundreds of different cameras around them taking their photo. And then when you see the spot, it's kind of like everyone's like little G.I. Joe figures. And sure enough, there's Deja like rapping on the top of a building at a block party, and this just came out like a month or two ago, and it was just really cool. Like it was their first sync, and it's those kinds of moments where I can really feel like close to the artist and the process creatively, but also see the marketing power of something like that. And I went to a movie screening on Saturday night, an outdoor movie screening of Coming to America, the original. And sure enough, it was sponsored by Crown Royal, and they like showed up with a little mini fridge of these cans and then played the ad in front of everyone. And I was like, this is a cool moment. So I had to like text Deja about it and be like, yo, you're famous. So that one just happened recently. It was like a real like magic moment that came together.
Fantastic. Ben, what about you?
I hope my internet connection is stable. It kept coming in and out. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, thinking about it, there's quite a lot for me. Growing up, I actually really enjoyed buying movie soundtracks. And my first one, I don't know if you remember this movie, early 90s, from A Reality Bites. That soundtrack, that song "Stay" by Lisa Loeb was a real big one for me. And I think that got used quite a bit after. But that was sort of one of those first tracks. I'm like, oh, this is a really fun track to listen to. As far as the first vivid memory I have coming off the bat off a movie, the movie about La Bamba, Richie Valens, I really enjoyed. That song itself when it was performed in the movie. I was looking it up and I did find it. I couldn't remember the name, but it's an old song by Santo and Johnny from 1959. It's called Sleepwalk. It's sort of the sleepy guitar use. That it's really sad when they find out Richie Valens got into that plane crash and his brother's kind of like screams in the air. Really emotional scene for me. That was sort of like one of my first memories of like, hey, I really enjoyed that instrumental use, and I kind of want to find that song. So that kind of stuck with me as far as an actual use. And then there's a lot with personal wise, and then professionally. There's quite a lot, a lot jumped in my head. There's those very early successes, and Mike, Rudy Chung, working with him when he's with Netflix now, but when he was over at Hit the Ground, they did all the CSI stuff. And I remember I was just kind of pretty fresh to the game, and this is back around 2008, 2009, where I wanted to be able to kind of help play something for one of our new artists at the time. And it was a general servicing, and kind of like at the time, I think it was a CSI New York placement. That was kind of a very memorable one. The money was nice, but it wasn't really about that. It was more like, awesome, got a first placement on that. It was a really, really happy feeling for me. A more memorable one, I didn't send this to Jasper because this was last year, but
We'll get them in a second.
Am I freezing up there?
You did.
Sorry, I think
you can just tell us again. Last year.
Am I coming through? Hey, sorry about that. Yeah, there we go. Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. So there was an Apple iPhone use last year. That was a really big campaign that we pitched over to the camp there, and it was an Alice Ivy track that. In my mind, it was used as a really creative 30-second spot that was a global run. The level as an example of something that really helped a song gain more popularity due to the fact that it was used in an Apple, especially in commercials, where if you get a placement there, not only is it good money, but it's also, hey, a lot more people are going to hear your music. They may be Shazamming it and trying to figure out what that song is, and your save rate, on Spotify list will go up that way. So that was a fun one, and we have one actually. I didn't want to send it because it's not happening yet, but we do have another Keys and Crates placement for a really big commercial out of the UK, and that's dropping October 1st, this Friday, and so campaign and. It helps. So these commercials can help, not just commercials, but any of these placements can kind of dictate a bit of what the record label does and what the publisher does, right? We'll sit down in our marketing meetings and we'll say, okay, this just changed our direction. Yes, this was the single that we wanted to release to radio, but this one just got attached to this, campaign that we know. So does it make sense to go more for this one versus that? So that's where sync is a very powerful tool for your song. So I listed more than one, and I could go on because I can't really choose a favorite when it comes to the stuff we've done in our work. But personally, that La Bamba one was awesome, and Lisa Loeb's awesome for the Reality Bites stuff. All right.
Awesome. No worries. No worries. And I'm just going to check in before I wrap it up. If there's any questions from any of our students or any of our audience members, feel free to chime in and send a message to the chat.
Can I ask a question of
If
the
you may.
audience? So the students involved here, are they all artists? Are they all like in what capacity? I don't know if anybody wants to put up their hand to say this is what I do, and this is like, what is your goal within the next 5 years? Based on the music that you're creating. Do you want to be that artist and that create that brand, or excuse me, do you want to be a composer for film? What do you want to do based on the music that you're making right now?
Who wants to jump in on that?
Or maybe you can just pick on someone and kind of say.
I'd have to let Jeff do that because he would be closer to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's something to think about then, at least, is within the next 3 to 5 years, where do you want to go? What direction do you want to take within music?
And fortunately, the students do follow up with Jasper. It doesn't just live in this space alone, and they get to dive into it. So this is something they will be able to reach out later if they have other questions. And obviously Jasper is such a great resource, so they're fortunate to have him. Yeah.
I have a question, actually. How creative is your job, would you say? Like, in terms of, is it you just matching what people are asking you for, or is there a certain level of creativity? Just trying to give some context as to, if you're feeling like you have a business acumen, but you also want to be creative with your business, or like, what's the ratios of business versus creativity versus being a musician? Do you have to be a DJ or musician to do the sort of job that you do, perhaps, in your opinion?
Yeah, for me, a lot of what I do, I'm in a desk job, and it's contract, it's paperwork, it's a lot of agreements. So I would say a lot of the business takes over. But for the creative, when I get the chance, there is when I work with publishing clients specifically, I will, if they ask about sync and say, hey, what can we do to help create more favorable music to pitch? Well, we'll put this camp together about we would like you to write to, what you could include in your lyrics, where you want to go with your sound. So there's that part. I don't personally get in a studio with them. I've only been sometimes, but that's not what I do. My thing is honestly mostly being here, I guess, work from home or at the office, where I'm taking a lot of calls and talking to a lot of this or production companies to get a lot of that work processed. So that's the reality of what I do. So the percentage, more of what I do, I would say, is business over creative. But and I think it's easier for anyone to get into that role, whether you're a musician or not. If you wanted to do what I'm doing, if you wanted to do what Mike's doing, as far as talking to those gatekeepers who put that music to film, TV, wherever, you just have to have that basic knowledge or understanding of where the rights are, and you can represent that. And if you've got an agreement made where that artist says to you, you can represent my music, go forth from there. From that point on, take classes like these, meet other people in the industry, and I'm always here and happy to help, to provide that additional knowledge if needed. Thompson or Jasper, if there's anyone that asks you like what more, like how do I go about doing this, I'm happy to provide that. I'm sure Mike is as well, to provide that knowledge.
Amazing. Thanks so
Yeah,
much.
I see a few people have mentioned
Oh.
that they're not totally sure what they want to do, and that music is definitely an option. And look, I mean, you're talking to two people who came into this career path somewhat accidentally. You know, a failed groupie and a failed rapper. You know what I mean? Like, look, we both just kind of went out there and tried some things and put ourselves in environments. So look, this is, you know, I commend you first and foremost for being here, you know, for showing up and taking an interest. And truthfully, that's what makes a difference. That leads to the next step. And, you know, never be afraid to ask a question, to put your hand up, to reach out to someone. You lose very little, you know. The worst can happen, that the person doesn't get back to you, which is fine. You keep it moving. It's very rare that anyone's ever really going to be rude to you in return. But best case scenario is that person takes note that you took an interest in what they do. And look, I mean, Ben and I are here. We're still really interested in what we do. We enjoy talking about it. One thing I will say is if you ever want to approach people, generally, I think in our business, it's not a bunch of cool kids. You know, we're all liner note geeks. You know what I mean? Like we're people who genuinely really love music, and we found a lane for ourselves. You know, we're not in this for ego. We want to be helpful. We want to be of service. I think, you know, if there's ever someone that you want to approach, just think about the approach. Put yourself in that person's shoes, and take a moment. And I'll give myself as an example. You know, I knew no one in this business at all, like zero people. And I just started to find contacts on the internet. I was just Googling around shady PDFs that I was downloading with outdated contact information and whatever it was, a bunch of emails. And I'd come across a PDF with 300 emails on it, and I would send one email to 300 people. I would write it, here's a link, whatever, boom. And I would send it and be like, all right, cool. Like, let's see what happens. And not a lot happened from those, you know, because I didn't tailor my approach, and I didn't think about who the people were on the receiving end, how I could like tailor my approach to individual people. And I think that's what a lot of us want, you know, is someone who just takes the time. We get a lot of spam emails. Everybody does. You hate spam emails. I guarantee no one's ever said like, yo, I love really impersonal spammy emails. No one says that ever. So if you're ever interested in approaching someone, or, you know, and you're genuine about it, hey, look, I'm so-and-so, I'm from Toronto, I'm in this program, this is my interest, whatever. And you just approach someone, you know, on that level, I guarantee you, you know, that there will be people who will want to talk you through that, because they can empathize with what that position is like, you know. And I'll say this, like, I didn't know a lot of people in the business at all. There were very few people to know in Toronto. I got to know Ben real quick, you know, and I was emailing people in LA, and that felt very out of touch for me. I felt very far removed from the opportunity and the movers and shakers in the industry or whatever. And I remember I would do these blanket emails. And one time I saw some music supervisors that were coming to Toronto for Canadian Music Week. And I thought, all right, man, look, this is my chance, you know. And I was following a music supervisor on Twitter, and, you know, but this is pre-Instagram, so Facebook, whatever it was. And I had learned that this music supervisor is a vegan. And this is, mind you, 10 years ago. So being a vegan 10 years ago is a very different thing. And I was recently vegetarian, and I emailed this person. I'd emailed them 4 or 5 times, never heard anything back. My subject line, I saw they were coming to Toronto. Subject, vegan snacks in Toronto. And I hit this person. I was like, look, like, I know that you're vegan. I know that traveling as a vegan can be difficult. I see that you're coming to my city. This is where I'm from. I'm recently vegetarian. Like, I got some good spots. Like, I could either take you, you know, to a restaurant, or I could bring food to the hotel if you don't have time. You know, by the way, here's a link to the band that I manage. Yo, that person responded in record time. You know what I mean? Like, just it's right away responded like, yo, you're talking my language. Let's do this, whatever. And right away, that, like, you know, the lesson there. And interestingly enough, they pointed it out to me, because when we met, we got along really well, whatever, ate vegan food. It was lovely. We still work together now. But she was like, you know what? It annoyed me that you told me that you had emailed me 4 or 5 times and I never got back to you. I felt bad about that, you know? And I was like, oh, shoot, cool, we're good now. And she was like, no. But I looked back, and I looked at your emails, and they were terrible. And so I hope you learned a lesson here, because once you tailored your approach, and you treated me like a person and you were of service to me, you could be helpful to me. She's like, people come to me all the time asking me for things. And you flipped that and said, hey, can I help you out? And also, not a lot of people were feeling for vegans at the time. And so it was like, all right, cool. Like, and I'm like, she's coming to my city. I had the upper hand. In the world of sync opportunities, she had the upper hand by far. In the land of finding vegan food in Toronto, I had every card. So, it worked out. I like to give that example. I don't think it has to be centered around vegan snacks or whatever, but I'm just saying when you do approach people, I think be thoughtful. If you come across one person or 10 people and you pick one and kind of say, hey, you know what, this person seems interesting. You have the internet, man. Like LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I don't know, find out whatever platforms they're on, learn a little bit about them and try to lead with that by bonding to them in some way and being really honest about the position that you're in. I ate a lot of humble pie for a long time. It was a very, very steady diet. And I still cold email people all the time. I promise you I do, like constantly. I'm not afraid to DM someone or email them or whatever it is. People that are way bigger than me, more important than me. I don't care, because to me, I'm just like, look, I'm going to be humble. I'm not telling you that I'm big and bad. I'm just coming to you humbly, being like, can I be of service? So I think that's really important. I wish that someone would have instilled, that in me a little bit earlier. But again, I learned from my mistakes. And thankfully, I had someone who also really echoed that very directly to me and told me my emails were terrible. So I would suggest, don't be afraid to approach people. Just be cool about it. Be yourself, be humble, and genuinely take an interest. You don't need to have it figured out right now. One step will lead to the next. But, keep taking steps forward and you'll be good. Plus, look at the people that you have in your corner. Look at these guys. It's incredible.
That's great. Someone's always told me, take an interest in people, and I think that's super important, right? Especially when you have to connect with them. There's a reoccurring theme, I think, with all of these talks is people who we've had generally are big fans of the music, and it sounds weird to say that, but not everybody is like a true fan. And I find that a lot of guests that we've had, especially who've had a journey that's been not sort of a direct path, and they've landed in something not necessarily that they're going after. Part of it has just been that they've just been a fan of the music, and then they found the home that was right for them within that space. So which is really great. Anyways, I just, it's come to that time. So I wanted to thank our panelists, Mike and Ben, for joining us. This has been really great. And, we hope we'll see you later for a future talk at some point, whether it's, this year is almost over, but I can't believe that. But definitely we'd love to have you and follow up to a part 2 or something like that. Tamla's put your handles into into the chat, so you guys will be able to follow up there, but also be able to follow up with Jasper. And thanks to Simone, Tamla, and the youth committee for supporting this event. Also, thank you to Stephanie and Jasper for bringing this series to life behind the scenes like they always do. Please check back with our YouTube channel as well, as Every Little Voice podcast, and for the past RPSM talks recordings. This will be up on the playlist at some point. Jasper's been very diligent about making sure this gets up there, and we thank him for all the hard work that he's been doing. Make sure to RSVP for the next one happening October 28th at 7 p.m. where we'll talk about RPSM. We'll talk to RPSM grad Francis Scott Heat. So that's going to be exciting. I'm Thompson, Egbo-Egbo, and this concludes the 6th installment of RPSM Talks. We will leave you with an Apple spot from Greater Goods. This is celebrating Canadian music maker, featuring the song by Freak Motif. Did I say that right, Mike?
Nailed it.
Okay, perfect. And just John, called Hot. Talk to you soon. Thanks everyone for joining.
Canada, we're the top of the global food chain when it comes to music, man,
I know I'm hot, but I'm keeping my cool. I'm making Nazi just out of the loop. Connected some dots, still got so much to prove. My soul never run, I'm chicken noodle soup. I know I'm